Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're exploring a story really ripped straight from the pages of history. It's one filled with these impossible choices, huge risks, and, well, some surprising moments of light in really dark times.
Absolutely. We're looking at the life of Frits Philips, specifically his actions during the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands in World War II.
Yeah, and this isn't just, a standard biography. We're really trying to get under the surface.
Exactly. Think of it as a deep look at courage under immense pressure. We've been going through accounts, historical records, things that really lay bare the incredible decisions he was up against.
The kind of tightrope he walked.
Precisely. And what his story might tell us about leadership, resilience, and maybe the power of just one person's actions when everything seems to be falling apart.
So let's set the scene a bit. It's 1940. Europe's under siege. The Netherlands has just fallen. The Philips family, the founders of the electronics giant, well, most of them fled. They went into exile.
But Fritz, who was only 35 then, but already pretty key in the company, he made a completely different choice.
He stayed.
He stayed. And that choice, that's really where our deep dive begins. Why stay? The material we've looked at really grapples with this.
Was it just duty to the company, the name?
Or maybe something deeper. His faith, perhaps. He was deeply Christian, a belief he had to stay, protect his people. Or maybe just this gut feeling that someone had to remain. You couldn't just abandon everyone.
It sounds like a mix of things, but definitely a heavy sense of responsibility.
For sure. And it forces us, and you listening, to think about that really hard question right from the start.
Yeah. When you're faced with choices where there's no good outcome, genuinely impossible choices, what would you do? What path would you take?
It's easy to ask that now, isn't it? Sitting here comfortably, his story puts you right there in the thick of it.
Okay, so let's unpack that first big decision. The invasion, May 1940. Hits hard, fast. The rest of the leadership is gone, but Fritz is there.
And he essentially steps up. He becomes the leader for Phillips's operations inside occupied territory. Think about that.
It's huge. He's not just, running a factory. He's the face, the protector for tens of thousands of employees living under this absolutely brutal regime.
The atmosphere must have been just suffocating. Constant Nazi presence, fear everywhere, arbitrary arrests, violence always looming.
And yet, the accounts describe him actually walking the factory floors, even in those early days.
Not hiding away, out there, visible, showing solidarity. It wasn't just about keeping production going. It was about morale, showing Philips still stood for them.
Which leads to that incredible anecdote, the company's 50th anniversary in 1941,
Yeah.
right in the middle of the occupation.
Yeah, amazing they even marked it. And Fritz announces extra pay for everyone, a huge gesture at that time.
And the workers' reaction? It's just so vivid. They were so overcome, apparently. They lifted him right under their shoulders there on the factory floor.
Can you picture it? The fear outside, the guards maybe watching, and then this explosion of just pure joy and gratitude.
It wasn't just about the money, clearly. It was a signal, wasn't it? A moment of hope. Like, we're not forgotten, someone's still fighting for us.
It must have cemented that bond between him and the workforce, a bond that was going to be tested in the most extreme ways.
And that test came pretty starkly, didn't it? Things escalated.
Dramatically. This is where the story gets incredibly dark, but also incredibly complex. The Nazis came with a demand.
A chilling one. Philips had to open a factory workshop inside the Vogt concentration camp.
Just think about that, setting up operations in a place synonymous with suffering, with death.
Most people you'd think would react with just horror, maybe refuse, maybe just comply completely under duress. But Fritz, he saw something else.
He saw a sliver of possibility, however horrifying the context.
Yeah.
The records detail his response, and it's strategic, almost audacious.
He didn't just say yes, he negotiated. Hard.
Right. He saw that if Philips was in there, maybe, just maybe, he could control who worked there, use it as some kind of shield.
So he pushed for Philips to have the final say on supervision and, crucially, on employment within that workshop.
Exactly. And his goal was terrifyingly brave and unbelievably risky. He wanted to employ as many Jewish prisoners as possible.
How did he even argue that?
By using the Nazis' own logic, essentially. He argued these specific prisoners were essential labor, vital for Philips' production, which in turn was deemed necessary for the German war effort. It sounds cold, calculated.
But the intention was purely to save lives.
Absolutely. It was a gamble on an unimaginable scale. using the perceived value of forced labor against the very system enforcing it, hoping to carve out this tiny pocket of relative safety inside a death camp.
The pressure must have been immense, appearing cooperative enough to get it approved, but gaining enough control to actually protect people.
Walking a tightrope doesn't even begin to cover it.
And the outcome. It's just staggering when you hear the numbers.
It really is. Of the 469 Jewish prisoners who were assigned to work in that Philips workshop at Vogt, 382 survived the war.
382 lives. In a place where survival was the exception, not the rule. That workshop became, well, a fragile sanctuary.
It was freedom, obviously. It wasn't comfort. But for those 382 people, it was very likely the difference between life and death. This wasn't just business. It was a high-stakes gamble for human lives.
It inevitably brings up that question, though. Was he a hero?
He always hated that label, apparently, insisted others deserve the credit. But when you look at the sheer risk...
He's operating right under the noses of the SS, wasn't he?
Constantly. Risking exposure, risking death for himself and everyone in that workshop if his true motives were discovered, or even if production just didn't meet their quotas.
It wasn't resistance from the outside throwing bombs. It was resistance from within.
Exactly, which required compromise, required navigating this truly evil system, using its own rules against itself. It's messy. History in these situations is rarely clean, is it?
No, definitely not. And the pressure didn't let up. As the war dragged on, things got even tougher.
Right. The tide started turning against Germany, and tensions in the Netherlands were high. In 1943, there was a big wave of strikes by Dutch workers, including at Philips.
Protesting Nazi policies. And the Nazis didn't take kindly to that, especially at a key company like Philips.
Their reaction was swift and brutal. They saw Frits as the leader, the symbol. So, to break the strike, assert control, they arrested him.
Just arrested him?
Arrested him and held him hostage. The threat was explicit: execution unless the strike stopped.
My God. He was imprisoned for how long?
5 months. 5 agonizing months. He later described it as his life hanging by a silken thread.
You can only imagine the psychological terror. Day in, day out, not knowing if this is the day. Your life depended on things totally outside your control.
And it wasn't just his own suffering during that time. The cost was terribly real for others, too.
The executions.
Yes. While he was in prison, the Nazis executed 7 men in reprisal for the strikes. 4 of them were Philips employees, men he knew, men who worked under him.
That's devastating.
And there's this detail. Apparently, for the rest of his long life, Frits Philips would personally go and lay flowers at the site where those men were executed.
Wow. A constant reminder.
A silent, lifelong acknowledgement of the human cost, perhaps his sense of responsibility for those under his care. It's incredibly poignant.
His own time in captivity nearly ended much worse, didn't it? His escape.
It sounds like something from a movie. Rumors started swirling that senior Dutch figures like him, held hostage, were about to be deported, likely to camps in Germany, which was basically a death sentence.
So he didn't wait?
He didn't wait. He seized a moment. The accounts say he somehow slipped out through a window in his office, even while under guard, got on a bicycle and just vanished.
Incredible. Where did he go?
Into hiding.
Right.
Relying on, well, intuition, the kindness of strangers, maybe sheer luck or providence as he might have seen it. Hiding in attics, farmhouses constantly moving to evade capture.
And the Nazis, furious they couldn't find him, went after his family.
They did. They arrested his wife, Sylvia, held her at a camp, explicitly as leverage, trying to force Frits out of hiding.
That's just barbaric.
But her courage matched his. She was in this terrifying situation herself, but she refused to betray him, wouldn't give up his whereabouts.
And she survived.
Miraculously, yes. She endured the camp and was released just before it was evacuated. A very narrow escape. It really underscores the shared sacrifice, the resilience of the whole family during this period.
So fast forward, September 1944, Eindhoven is liberated by the Allies. Frits emerges from hiding.
He comes back to a city and a company that's just battered, physically scarred from bombings, emotionally scarred from years of occupation, loss.
Devastation. A lot of people would just be overwhelmed.
But Frits, having gone through his own ordeal, having seen what his employees endured, he apparently just threw himself into rebuilding. No hesitation, took charge of reconstructing Philips, getting things running again.
And it wasn't just about getting back to normal, was it? Under his leadership, Philips really took off.
It really did. He guided its transformation from being mainly a European company to a true global powerhouse. The records show revenue tripled under his leadership in the post-war years.
And pushing innovation hard.
Relentlessly. This is the era Philips pioneered things we almost take for granted now. The compact audio cassette that changed everything for portable music.
Absolutely. And they laid the groundwork for the CD too, right?
They did. Crucial technical groundwork that led directly to the compact disc later on, fundamentally changed how we listen to music, consume audio. Huge impact.
But the sources suggest his leadership wasn't just about market share and new gadgets. There was a philosophy behind it.
Very much so. He had this deep belief in, well, social responsibility. That a big company like Philips had obligations beyond profit.
He saw it as a community.
Yes, a community. Responsible for the well-being of its employees, the city around it. There's that quote where he urged his successors to take good care of the shop.
Not just the business, but the people.
Exactly. Care for it with compassion, integrity. That seemed to be his driving principle, the real legacy he wanted Philips to uphold.
Now, we should circle back, because it's important, as the sources note, his wartime actions weren't seen positively by everyone. There was controversy.
Yes, that's true, both at the time and later. Some people accused him of collaboration, basically, of being too close to the occupiers just by keeping the company running under their noses.
It raises that really difficult question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When the alternative might be total destruction, losing everything, the company, the jobs, maybe more lives, can you actually resist from within such an evil system without making compromises that look bad later?
Or that are genuinely compromising,
Yeah.
even if necessary for a greater goal. It's messy. History forces us to look at these gray areas, these impossible binds. The sources present this tension. They don't shy away from it.
No easy answers.
Definitely not. But what does seem clear, undeniable really, is the tangible impact, especially at Vote. The lives saved.
And that was formally recognized, wasn't it? Much later.
Yes, powerfully so. In 1996, Israel honored him. He was named one of the righteous among the nations.
Which is a very specific high honor for non-Jews who risked their own lives to save Jews during the Holocaust.
Exactly. It speaks volumes about how his actions, particularly concerning the Jewish workers at VU, were ultimately viewed by historians and, crucially, by the State of Israel.
So it brings us back full circle to that question we asked you, the listener, at the start.
Yeah. The sources really push us all to consider it. When the world closes in and hope seems lost, what would you risk for others? Faced with that kind of pressure, would you find that strength? To stand firm, to strategize, even to sacrifice?
It's easy to say yes now, but his story makes it feel so real, the potential cost. Imprisonment, loss, death.
It really challenges us. Do we have that capacity for courage, that deep commitment to others when faced with real evil?
I think the lesson that comes through these accounts is pretty powerful.
It is. That greatness isn't about not being afraid. It's about acting despite the fear.
Frits Philips, he was a businessman, right? Thrust into this unbelievable situation.
Guided by his conscience, his faith, whatever it was. And he shows that one person making incredibly difficult choices can change things, can alter history in small but vital ways.
The darkness was real, undeniably. But his story is kind of a testament, isn't it? That even a small light, if you hold it steady, if you place it strategically.
It can pierce that darkness, it can save lives.
So the story of Frits Philips, his decision to stay, that dangerous game at Vought, his own suffering, his escape, rebuilding afterwards, the legacy, it's just a profound reminder of the impact one person's choices can make.
And it leaves us and leaves you with that final thought from the material we looked at, something to really mull over.
So what will you do when your moment comes?
When you face your own challenge, big or small, will you shrink from it, or will you, maybe like Frits Philips, rise to meet it?
Knowing that your actions, even small ones, if they're guided by courage, by compassion, they can make a difference.
Let his story be maybe, a challenge, an inspiration perhaps. In the face of fear, choose courage. In the face of injustice, choose compassion.
And wherever you find yourself, maybe choose to be a light.